So what is going on, guys? I'm BlackOpsAmazing. Welcome back to another video on the channel where today we're going to be talking about the first one. Is this the god within our Call of Duty Zombies universe? Or I should say multiverse. There has only been one time where the first one has been mentioned, not to be confused with the One, which is another name for the Forsaken. In Black Ops Cold War we heard that name quite a lot before we ever knew who the Forsaken actually was. Before his official name was revealed to us, we were told that within the Dark Ether there was something called the One, who was the Forsaken. But that isn't the first one. These are two totally different creatures, beings, whatever they are, because, well, we don't know. And like I said, that's because to the best of my knowledge, we've only ever heard of the first one once. And that was from a cipher that you could find in Gorod Karovi. It read Canorium Excerpt 349561223. The summoning key is one of the oldest artifacts in all creation. It was used by the first one to mix all the dimensions with life, giving each one its unique balance. Under certain circumstances, it has the ability to form bridges between dimensions, allowing the transfer of life forces back and forth. It resides in the 63rd dimension of creation. The summoning key, which we know is one of the oldest artifacts in all creation, was used by the first one to mix all the dimensions with life, giving each one its unique balance. Now, because this was the only time we ever heard of any reference to this first one, that by the sounds of it pretty much created life, I never really gave it too much thought. Also because from what we know about the summoning key, it was created by the Keepers. The Canorium tells us about this. The Keepers crafted the summoning key, a device that allows them to manipulate the ether. Holding power to alter reality itself, they use it to create Argotha. And another thing the Canorium tells us is, in the beginning, the only things that existed were the ether and the Keepers, and among them, two beings who were Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man. So if we have this character in our zombie storyline called the first one, and the Canorium mentions that there was only the ether, the Keepers, Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man, there is no mention of this first one in the beginning, yet considering his name, the first one, you would think he would have existed during that time as well, if not before. But this person, I'm assuming the first one is, because by the sounds of it, he created life, is nowhere to be seen. And to go along with this, if we are told that the Keepers crafted the summoning key and the first one used the summoning key to create life in all dimensions, that would have to mean the first one existed after the Keepers, because otherwise how would he have the summoning key if they weren't around to make it? So then he wouldn't be the first one. So if his name is what it says, meaning the first thing to ever exist, that doesn't line up. He couldn't be. By the sounds of it, or if you asked anyone, what is another name you would give to someone who created life? They would more than likely say God. If the first one mixed all dimensions with life, you would say, well, okay, that's a simplified description of God. But again, we are told that using the summoning key, the Keepers used it to manipulate the ether and created Argotha. If you weren't to know any better, you would probably think, well, the Keepers sound more like God. They created the summoning key, they used it to manipulate the ether, they used it to alter reality and create Argotha. So ever since we first had this cipher in Gorod Karovi, it's always been a little bit weird to me because, okay, the first one used the summoning key to mix all dimensions with life, but it was a device that was created by the Keepers. The Keepers used it for altering reality, creating Argotha, all things which, in my opinion, is something that this godly figure, the first one, should be doing. And so one thing until this video I've always questioned about this is, because it's a cipher, was it incorrectly deciphered? When it says it was used by the first one, is that supposed to say it was used by the first ones? And we know the first ones would be the Keepers. To me, that would make more sense with what we know about the zombie storyline. The Keepers, along with Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man, were the first ones. But we were actually never told in the Canorium that the Keepers mixed all dimensions with life. That's only ever mentioned in this cipher. And well, as I've just mentioned, it wasn't just the Keepers who existed in the beginning, it was also Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man. And Dr. Monty specifically has some godly powers. According to him, we don't know how true this is because he's lied to us an awful lot, but he created free will.
You see, the thing is, I'm meant to stay on the sidelines, not really supposed to get involved. Free will and all that stuff. Oh, that was my idea, by the way. However, I do see stuff now and then that makes me go, ooh, that's not good. I really should do something. But the thing is, all I can really do is give things a little nudge. Sow a seed, plant an idea, see what grows, see what sticks.
As you just heard Monty say, he says, I was meant to stay on the sidelines, I'm not really supposed to get involved. Free will and all that stuff. That was my idea, by the way. If Dr. Monty gave us people free will, surely he would have to be the creator of you in order to give you free will, making him pretty much God. Along similar lines, another thing Dr. Monty tells us in Gorod is that he receives messages from people, which alternatively would be prayers.
It's too much information sometimes, know what I mean? I know you must be struggling to take it all in, but can you imagine how I feel? I've got heartfelt prayers to the angels, dying people's wish lists and letters to fucking Santa coming out of my bleeding ears. And it's hard to keep up, honestly. I hardly ever get any time for myself, or even just time to stand back and appreciate all the good that I've done. And now, I've got the bloody Shadow Man and the Apothecocky Cons throwing an intergalactic spanner in the works.
Everything that he told us, if he's not lying, would make you think Dr. Monty 100% is God. If he gave people free will, if he's receiving prayers, you would have absolutely no reason to think otherwise. And just to confirm it, this is the final thing he says.
I made an app once. At least I think that's what you call it. It started off really simple. All people did was press a button to indicate whether or not they'd had a good day. I tracked the data for everyone in the world. I mean, it was meant to help me understand people. It worked. But even in its simplest form, it was too much to take in. It actually made me depressed. It's hard trying to please everyone. Oh, I'm getting worked up. Honestly, you have no idea how hard it's been from my side. Sorry. Keep up the good work. I'm sure you'll sort it out.
So yes, we've seen and now we've just heard that Dr. Monty has many powers. In the Revelations ending, he showed his ability to get rid of Primus by wiping them from existence. With basically the click of his fingers, he can appear anywhere in the multiverse. We also know that besides from Tag der Toten, he knows where our characters are. Primus, Ultimus, Richtofen, Taki, Nikolai and Dempsey, etc. He knows where we are 100% of the time, and that's because we don't have souls. We discovered that in Tag der Toten, and that was the reason why Dr. Monty couldn't find us in that map. When Primus and Ultimus were going about destroying the multiverse and banishing Dr. Monty to the Dark Ether, you would think Dr. Monty, with all of his powers, would have easily found where we were in the forest and put a stop to it, but he couldn't find us because the leader, who was Nikolai, still had his soul. That was the reason why in Blood of the Dead he was made leader of the group, who replaced Richtofen. All three of the other characters had lost their souls. Richtofen in the Giant, Dempsey in Der Eisendrache, Takio in Zetsubo but at that point we hadn't yet gone to Garrod Kuruvi, so Nikolai still had his soul, meaning he was the perfect leader to replace Richtofen. Dr. Monty wouldn't be able to find them because he can only track people who don't have a soul. Nikolai did. But in relation to this video, that's important because it shows Dr. Monty is extremely powerful. Everything I've just described are godly powers in my opinion. And for me, the final nail in the coffin, unless everything that he said is a lie, was this.
Alright, so you've got this universe, this big, changey, already volatile universe, and then you shatter it with a hammer, a metaphorical hammer, and it cracks and splinters into a million other universes, all coexisting at exactly the same time. Do you have any idea how difficult that is to keep track of? I may be omnipotent, but I can't be everywhere.
He said, I may be omnipotent, but I can't be everywhere. Omnipotent means you have ultimate power, the power of a deity, basically a god. Dr. Monty may as well have just come out and said he is God at that point, but, well, we killed him, or at the very least we banished him to the Dark Ether. He wasn't able to see people with souls, so to me, I don't think he was omnipotent. He might have thought he was, but obviously he had weaknesses. And to be fair, that can be the case for many gods throughout history. If we just take a look at Norse mythology, gods can be killed no matter how powerful they are, and we did that. That's what Dr. Monty is, because we're never officially told it. He's just described as a being that existed in the beginning alongside the Shadow Man. And well, we know Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man are very similar. They can both change forms. They were both corrupted by the Dark Ether, the Shadow Man by his own will because he was messing with it, and Dr. Monty trying to save his friend the Shadow Man, and upon doing so also got himself corrupted by the Dark Ether unknowingly. But if you look at both of those characters, their abilities and their appearances, they're not really too dissimilar. Actually, they're very much alike. So much alike that you might think they're the same person, or at one time they were. And back in Revelations, there was something that Dr. Monty said to us that always stood out. We know he randomly goes off on tangents anyway when he's talking. I mean, what do you expect? He's an old man, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of years old. He's been around since the beginning. But weirdly in Revelations, he just randomly comes out with this.
Something else I should probably clarify. This is it. The ether. The infinite. Otherwise known as Agartha. Or is it Agartha? Well, whatever way you slice it or spell it, it's the reality beyond. Beyond the world you know. Beyond your perception. Just so we're clear, I'm absolutely not talking about death. That's a whole other can of worms. Speaking of which, you know how people say when you cut a worm in half, both parts keep on living? Well, they do. Kind of, for a bit. But then one of them dies, not sure if it's the arse or the head. Well, that's the problem with worms. They're a bit short on distinguishing features. What was the point I was making?
So he says, you know how people say when you cut a worm in half, both parts keep on living? Well, they do. Kind of. For a bit, but then one of them dies, not sure if it's the head or the ass, but that's the problem with worms. They're a bit short of distinguishing features. Now when we first heard this, people were making the connection that Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man are the same person, or at least at one time they were, because they look the same, they existed at the same time in the beginning, and they have similar powers. The theory was, at one point, Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man were one person, and then at some point in time, they became split, just like a worm. They lack distinguishing features, which is why both of them look and act the same. The Shadow Man is just more corrupted than Dr. Monty. But if that was the case, if Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man at one point were one, could that have been the first one? The one who created life in all dimensions? The only problem I still have with that is the first one can't have existed before the Keepers, because he used the summoning key to create life, and it was the Keepers that created the summoning key. And again, there's really no other mention anywhere of the first one in our zombie storyline, which I think is just a bit weird. I can't help but think that cipher must be wrong. There is just one tiny error in which it's supposed to say the first ones, but instead it says the first one. Whether that mistake was made on Treyarch's side or the side of the people who decrypted the message, or maybe it is correct. It's odd. But similarly, well, Dr. Monty has pretty much described himself as God. So was Dr. Monty the first one? I have to say, I think Dr. Monty contradicts himself a lot, because in Rev, he later comes out and says, well, he's actually not all-powerful.
If I'm honest, I'm a bit scared. Seriously. Brown trousers time. I mean, I know it's the same old story. The forces of good and evil battling it out. Yeah, but no one ever tells you how much hard work it is. You know, I'm not all powerful. It's always been a struggle to stay on top of it. Now more than ever. If it had been entirely up to me, it would have been a lot more straightforward, I tell you. Do what you can, eh?
So he started by saying he's omnipotent, and then later on said, well, he's not all-powerful, but if it had been entirely up to him, things would have been a lot straightforward. Dr. Monty saying what he just said makes it seem like, well, there was someone else who was making the decisions as well. It wasn't just him who was left to stay on top of things, it was someone else, and that someone else can only be the Shadow Man. This is a topic that I've never made a video on. I've spoken a lot about Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man, but never in regards to Dr. Monty actually being God. More of him just being someone who existed in the beginning. So let me know what you guys think about that one in the comments section below. Who is the first one? Is it Dr. Monty? Was it Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man when they were combined when they were one person, if that was ever the case, because again, that's also never actually been confirmed to us, it's just something we've put together based off quotes. Or is the first one someone totally different that we've never seen? Or was there a mistake made in that cipher, and the first one or the first ones are the keepers? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like rating. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.